Hello and welcome back to the Atmosphere Electric. There's Fran. How are you, buddy?
Yeah, good morning. I'm very well. You?
Good stuff. Yeah, no, not too bad. And I'm rich, not as in financially, because all of my bets don't come off. But nonetheless, we're here to talk.
Well,
Well,
you say that.
I did.
We landed
Well,
the bank. We landed our bankers again.
yeah, I mean, at one point it was looking Saturday night. It was looking like a very good prediction week, wasn't it? In terms of, I think the first four were absolutely bob on with a couple of correct scores as well.
At one point, it looked like we were going for the whole lot, and I messaged you to say it's the first week I've not backed it. Typical.
Yeah. So actually, I was quite relieved when Brentford beat Bournemouth just to take the pressure off, because otherwise I would have had a restless night, to say the least. If all five had come in, bob on, it would have been a bit of a problem. But yeah, not bad. But to be fair, it did feel at the time, we said it, didn't we? It felt like a relatively easy game week to predict. There wasn't a huge amount of jeopardy in the Premier League, of course. The Carabao Cup final proving that there is always jeopardy, and actually probably the best place for us to start, because that's the first trophy of the season done and dusted. I actually really enjoyed the spectacle. I thought actually having the Newcastle fans' kind of passion and desire and all those other things that, for a cup that, let's be honest, if you're not in the final, normally sort of teams dial out of, don't they? Like, it's not perceived as one of the big ones. But I thought the Newcastle flavour added a lot to the day for me.
I think having a team that haven't won a trophy and showing their want and desire to change that in the final for a change made the game a lot more enjoyable, for a neutral perspective, watching it. And there's nothing worse than watching, say, a Man City versus an Arsenal or something like that, where it doesn't mean anything. Sometimes as kids playing, like, you could see just by the level of desire of the players, let alone the fans. Like, Newcastle were fantastic. Fans, players, everything about them. And I thought they fully deserved the win.
I was almost swept up in the emotion of, I was probably for the last 10 minutes, I was probably a Newcastle fan, being honest. Like I say, going to there, not really just wanting a good game of football, being honest, as a neutral, but actually at the end there, I was kicking every ball and clearing every challenge, and actually to see, what caught me by surprise was not the emotion as the whistle blew with them winning, because obviously I predict, but to see how many sort of grown men were in tears talking about the possibility of them winning before the game was really quite touching and surprising. Actually, like I say, I genuinely caught off guard by it.
Yeah, and I think a lot of clubs in the top six that win trophies regularly sort of take it for granted, don't they? Especially like a Carabao Cup. They go, it's just another trophy, stick it on the mantelpiece. Whereas actually, to a lot of the teams below them in the pyramid, it means the absolute world. Most of them, in some cases, have never seen their club win a trophy, let alone for 50 years or 20 years, whatever it is. They've probably never seen them. So, I mean, I think that's why going off a tangent, the FA Cup, it looks really open this year, and there's teams that have never won it before that are involved at a late stage. So I think that just makes the cup competitions a lot more interesting when you've got teams that it means the world to in it.
But actually, this is for me. I'm hoping, and it feels like in the last few years that the Carabao Cup, the League Cup, in whatever sponsorship you want to. I still remember it being the Rumbelows. That's how old I am.
The Milk Cup.
Yeah, I remember it. Like, it feels like that kind of stigma of celebrating it's starting to be sort of chipped away or eroded away quite quickly. And actually, I think this is only a good thing for the competition and football in general, because actually, if every team starts to take this a little bit more seriously, there is an opportunity for European football off the back of it. Obviously, silverware, the day out. I mean, those Newcastle fans will remember that day for the rest of their lives.
Absolutely. And especially, I think the main person who's probably got a lot of credit to take for that is Pep Guardiola. I mean, I think he takes a lot of stick for the way that he's changed the game and probably, taken a bit of flair out of the game. But I think he's the main one that came into the English game and started taking the Carabao Cup seriously, because it was just a trophy that you could stick on the mantelpiece. So I think he's got to take a lot of credit for that.
Yeah, actually, it's probably a fair point. But I think we all now need to just get off our high horses by saying it's only the League Cup and you shouldn't take it seriously and go, let's go all in as fan base, as a club. Let's go and try and win it, because why not? I don't understand why you wouldn't want to win it. Like, what's the benefit of not winning it?
Do you think that opinion of it's only the Carabao Cup is held by the top teams because they win trophies more often, but because the league, the finances in the league are basically bringing a lot of the teams closer together that they now can compete, you're starting to see that mentality shift from the top teams as well, because it was almost a guarantee that one of the top 4, 5, 6 teams were going to win it.
I think you've answered your own question there, actually, but in the sense that when you talk about finances, and because it's not financially rewarding enough, if you're already an established European side in terms of you qualify for Europe through league position, there's not enough of an incentive financially, really, for teams to buy into it. So we kind of laugh it off and brush it under the carpet and try and get knocked out in the third round so you save some fixtures. Whereas actually, if I look at the rest of the teams playing on Sunday, in the Premier League, you look at Everton, West Ham, Ipswich, Nottingham Forest. I'll keep Man City in it because you've used Guardiola, so I take it seriously. Brighton, Southampton, Wolves, Bournemouth, Brentford, Arsenal and Chelsea, Fulham, Spurs, and then Leicester remain. All of them would have absolutely taken that seriously on the day and would have enjoyed that day out and got something off the back of it. I can't think of a club, arguably maybe other than Liverpool, who either they had to take it well because they lost or didn't really care as much as Newcastle. Every other club would have wanted to win that cup, no doubt about it.
Absolutely. And on the Liverpool front, they clearly did take it seriously by the team selection. Are you worried about them going forward for the next few weeks? I certainly am, because they got battered by PSG. I'm not being funny. They were battered by Newcastle as well. They were outrun. They were outfought. I'm a little bit worried about them. I still think that the league is wrapped up. I think they're too far ahead, but I'm worried about them because I do think that some teams are going to have the better of them in the coming weeks. Their form seems to have dropped. They don't look anywhere near the team that they were a few weeks ago.
But so define worried, because I think that's an important part, because like you just said there, I'm getting worried about them, but they're still going to win the league. So what do you mean by worried in terms of?
Let's say they go the next two games and drop points, and then that adds further pressure on, and then the possibility of them blowing the league, I think, becomes a reality. I don't think they will. I think they're going to have enough to win the league still. They're too far ahead. But I think the longer it goes on, this bad slump of form, it's not like they're getting whooped every week, but you know what I mean? They're not at the level they were. I think it just opens up the possibility of somebody catching them.
So, yeah, okay. So I think the bigger problem for Liverpool is beyond this season. And I actually had a Liverpool fan do a quote for me or something in the house the other day, and on the Monday, so after the game, so obviously he's really fresh, and he'd actually gone down to Wembley and was offered a ticket for £1,200, and he said thankfully I didn't do it in the end, because I would have been more gutted if I'd spent £1,200 watching that shower. I think this season they're going to be absolutely fine, right? They will drop some points that we don't expect. You look at their next couple of fixtures; they've got Everton at home, Fulham away, West Ham at home. But they've also got Leicester, Spurs. Then they go Chelsea, Arsenal, Brighton, Palace. So it's not the easiest of run-ins, but they will get more than 12 points more than Arsenal in that journey, and they'll be fine to win the league. Which at the start of the season, if you'd have given Liverpool fans and us, we didn't pick them to win the league. It would have been a fantastic season. But it does now start to feel like it's a little bit flat and not quite the win that it was, like I said, 2 or 3 weeks ago. The issue for me is beyond this season. It feels to me like some of those players that we're not sure about whether they're staying are almost in their performances telling us they're not staying.
I thought there was an interesting sort of hint as to Van Dijk. I don't know if you saw the clip of him talking to Isak after the game, and he said, "Don't be late for pre-season," which I thought that's interesting. Like, that hints that he's going to be there.
Yeah, a lot of Liverpool fans have taken the pat on Slot's shoulder seriously. Like, I don't know, man. Like, Liverpool historically don't drop 150 million quid on a player. The owners don't do that.
No, they don't. But I think when the possibility of 3 of your star players all leaving for free and having to rebuild, it might force their hand.
But don't. Yeah, absolutely. They're going to have to. They're absolutely going to have to do something, because you can't lose even 2 of those players. Really, recently, they probably can't even lose 1 of those players, because actually, saw a really interesting piece of work around how actually the biggest problem for Liverpool at the weekend was they normally can find their way around the Newcastle block, but because they didn't have Trent pulling the strings, they actually found it much more difficult to play around Newcastle because they didn't have their playmaker on the pitch. And that's actually really cool. I never really thought of it like that before. Is that we all kind of dig Trent out for his defensive kind of frailties, but actually in unpicking a block, unpicking a defensive team, you need that quality on the ball. And of course, that option for Salah to kind of, Salah was not receiving the right type of pass, so therefore not being able to get past the defender. So I think Liverpool are in trouble next season.
Yeah, I do. I mean, when I look at that team now, I mean, yes, it's been functioning. It looks a great team, but Salah is miles off it at the minute. He looks shattered. Doesn't look the player of a few weeks ago, does he? Similar to most teams, they're lacking a number 9, aren't they? And that's obviously why they're looking at someone like Isak. But Jota, I like Jota, but he's not the answer. I don't think he's a good player. I'd probably play him out on the wing as opposed to down the middle. Núñez quite clearly isn't the answer and seems to have fallen out of favour. Diaz, when he's on fire, looks a hell of a player, but when he's not, he's pretty average. So I think there is some holes in that Liverpool team which do need filling. Then you add into the players out of contract. You could be looking at 5, 6, 7 players, couldn't you, with a rebuild?
Well, and they've got, like you said, you talked about, obviously Núñez, Jota, Gakpo's fallen off, Luis Diaz as well. And there's rumours that Barcelona want to go have a little dabble at Luis Diaz. The midfield 3 doesn't look quite as strong as it did a few weeks ago. And of course, if you take Trent and Van Dijk out of that back 5, it's a very, very different outlook. It's a very, very different team. And actually, the issue becomes if Newcastle qualify for Champions League, which is very much, not very much, well, no, they've got a game in hand. So if they win the game in hand, of course, that would have been, that could put them on 50 points, which puts them in 4th place.
Yeah.
Does Isak leave Newcastle? When you talk about that changing the guard, if Newcastle, bearing in mind with their owners, have the chance with a European run to go again and sort of with PSR sort of moving upwards a little bit, have a little dabble in the market, Liverpool losing some players and then having to spend money just to stand still, you could see over the next 18 months a bit of a change of the guard between the two clubs.
I think Isak has come out on record, hasn't he, to say if Newcastle don't qualify for Champions League, then he will look to leave. So if they do, there's a big possibility that he rejects any move. Because I think quite clearly he does enjoy being there. He's the main man. He's absolutely adored by the fans. So, yeah, I think qualifying for the Champions League, I think he will stay around.
The other part about this is that if Isak becomes available, every team in Europe that can afford him will have a go.
Be interesting to see where he goes, because when I look around Europe for teams that could afford him, Real Madrid have got Mbappe as their forward, so he's probably not going to go there. Barca, I don't think can afford him. They've got Lewandowski. Bayern Munich have got Harry Kane. Don't need him. So it does look to me that the only teams around, the big teams around Europe are the English clubs that can afford him. And is there a team at the minute? The only team that you would say doesn't need him is Man City. Every other club does.
Well, I would argue Man City need him. And this is the point. So, because again, we talked about when Haaland's injured, and again, obviously Alvarez is doing wonderful things out in Atletico Madrid. Watched a great game at the weekend with the Atletico Madrid versus Barcelona. Fantastic game of football. Alvarez doing some great bits out there. Actually, if Man City are going to take themselves seriously, I would say they're another number 9 short. Now, whether you go there and think, I don't want to be competing with Haaland, but actually, could you create some different... again, we are starting to see, by the way, more of the return to the old school 4-4-2. So that would be an interesting dynamic. I think Arsenal would come all in.
Arsenal are the one, aren't they? They're the main one that
Chelsea
for forward. Chelsea, yeah.
And I think that you can't discredit Real Madrid, because actually you could see Mbappe coming in off the left. If you look at the rest of the players around that Real Madrid team, if they do get Trent on a free, that will free some money up to go and get a forward. I still think they are a number 9 short, Real Madrid, if I'm being honest. I think
he's not a 9, is he, Mbappe? But they're using him to squeeze in Vinicius, Mbappe, and Rodrigo, aren't they?
And so I think of the 3, I think Rodrigo's the risk. You drop him out, you put Isak in there, and all of a sudden that Real Madrid team is back to some of those kind of, I don't know what the acronym would be in terms of the what was it? Messi, Neymar, and who was the other? Suarez. MSN, wasn't it? MSN. And yeah. BBC, Bale, Benzema, and Cristiano. But yeah, I think that Isak is one of those players that everybody goes for. And I'm not sure, even having won the league this season, whether next season Liverpool are the financial draw, bearing in mind that they are, maybe not going to throw the same amount of money as a Chelsea or an Arsenal, or the attractive draw like they have been previously.
I think, like you said, it all does depend. If they can get a contract over the line, let's say it's Mo Salah as an example, I think that changes the outlook on it completely, doesn't it? But if all 3 leave, clubs will be looking at that and saying there's no way that you're the same as last year.
No, I think it's a really, really going to be a very, very interesting, whatever it is, 3, 4, 5 months in Liverpool's next 5 years. I think it's a really, really interesting sort of fork in the road as to what sort of club they're going to be moving forward. Like I say, we were speaking about Bradley as being a backup to Trent, but he's not the same type of player. Trent is, like we just spoke about in terms of his distribution, almost irreplaceable in the marketplace, and certainly not irreplaceable. Or certainly irreplaceable for less than 60 million quid.
Do you know somebody who was out of contract until recently who would have been a nice fit there? Yes, he's on the older side, but Kimmich would have been a good pickup for Liverpool to say, Trent, he looks like he's going. Kimmich, you're pretty much like for like, aren't you? You could slot into he'd more push into midfield a bit more than Trent would, rather than staying wide, but very similar players.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think his contract might be up, I think. I've got a feeling.
He's just re-signed.
Has he really?
Yeah, so he would have been on a free and he's literally just re-signed, but a bit of forward planning there, they might have been able to pinch Kimmich.
Because going back on the other person the other team that I think would be in freeze out would be PSG.
PSG, yeah.
Because the rumor I've heard is that actually that's where Van Dijk
Ramos as well, don't they? I think there's a few which they want to sell on to generate some funds.
But that actually Van Dijk is going to PSG. So if you're getting in Van Dijk, maybe just as a heads up, you spoke about don't be late for pre-season. Maybe maybe Van Dijk was still better at PSG, not at Liverpool. Because I personally can't believe that Van Dijk doesn't know where he's playing next season now.
Yeah, do you know, the thing that I find odd about it is I haven't heard any. There's no rumours. Like normally you hear things, don't you? You see people linked. There hasn't been any solid rumours apart from Trent to Real Madrid. That's been around consistently, but there's been no rumours around clubs, has there? Not any solid links anyway. There's been a little bit here and there, but nothing solid.
Well, like I say, what I've heard is PSG for Van Dijk, and obviously Saudi for Mo Salah. Now, of course, looking down if we're suggesting for 1 second that Liverpool might lose 3 players on the free agency market, there is some options back in. You've got obviously Jonathan David, who's doing some great things at Lille on a free. You've got Leroy Sané, who I absolutely love.
Is he on a free?
At the moment, but again, 29. I'll tell you another player that I'm really surprised is Frank Anguissa, who's out in Napoli. Obviously, spent some time at Fulham. I absolutely think he does some great pieces. You've got Tyreek Mitchell coming up, left back. Angel Gomez, obviously broke into the England squad. Ola Aina from Nottingham Forest. You've got some really interesting options out there in terms of people that you could get in. Marco Verratti,
Jonathan Tah.
There's some really good options out there if you are proactive enough and quick enough in this market this summer. That again, thinking of what Arne Slot does, that he's got a very specific way of playing. Of course, most coaches do that because a very specific way of playing. So maybe, just maybe, if they get the transfer window right, they might be able to kind of fill some of those holes, albeit not like for like, but nonetheless.
There's an unnamed 31-year-old defensive midfielder out of contract as well.
I don't think he's going to Spain. So we move on. But genuinely, I absolutely loved the way that Newcastle held themselves. So we've gone around it, but loved the way that Newcastle held themselves. I thought it was great to see. Love the fact they're doing an open bus parade, going all in on it. I think it's absolutely fantastic. And I just hope that this is the final kind of cog that was needed to get everybody else on board with taking this cup seriously.
Yeah, congratulations, Newcastle.
Thoroughly deserved. And like I say, I actually genuinely enjoyed the game. I thought, sometimes cup finals can be a little bit dull and dank, can't they? I thought it was a decent game. I really enjoyed it.
Yeah. Just on a side note, did you see us getting a little bit stick about? We weren't slating him, but we were just saying Dan Burn isn't international quality, and then he goes and pops up with a goal, and a few trolls are on us.
I didn't know. Look, listen, man. A broken clock is right twice a day. Dan Burn at 6 foot, whatever he is, to score a header from a corner is exactly what he should be doing. That's not the problem. That doesn't solve. For me, that doesn't prove you right and us wrong. For me, he's not an international defender. I've not seen anything in him that tells me otherwise. But if I was going to tell you what he's good at, winning the ball in the air, that's exactly what he should be doing. Mm-hmm. I thought you was going to talk about the Wildstone.
That was an unbelievable prediction, wasn't it? You got ridiculous odds on that.
I hadn't seen him in ages and years, and there he pops up with his Newcastle kick, giving it Dan Burn to score first. 2-1. Isak, absolutely fantastic. Absolutely fantastic. Now, look, I think sort of the interesting piece is around, for me now, the other thing that's starting to become more and more of a conversation piece is like the managerial merry-go-round. Is how you have to phrase it. You can't talk about it in any other way, as we well know. And there's more and more rumours sort of coming out, and people sort of jostle and get themselves into position for what looks like might be happening in the coming weeks and months over the summer. And obviously that then leads us to a couple of clubs that are starting to kind of think about, actually, are they going to pull the plug? And let's start with the team that is probably, and again I haven't looked at the odds, but I'd imagine this manager is the favourite, or the next favourite to be kiboshed at Spurs. Obviously,
second, I think.
Is he?
The red hot favourite at the minute is Van Nistelrooy.
Okay, well, yeah. I mean, I think that would be a little bit, fair. I think you could argue that absolutely he won't be in the Championship next season with Leicester. I think that's a fair bet. But thinking of that, like, Spurs got absolutely battered by Fulham at the weekend. The only thing I got wrong in that prediction was I said Spurs would score 1. They didn't. It was 2-0. He's under a serious amount of pressure now. They're literally hanging on a thread, aren't they? If they lose to Frankfurt in the Europa League, do you see a chance that they pull the plug, stick Ryan Mason until the end of the season, and then go again in the summer to find somebody to replace him?
I don't think there's any smoke without fire, based on all the things you're hearing about Poch as well. I've seen pictures of him having dinner or lunch with Levy, all those sort of things. And I'm not saying it's going to be him that's next, because he's with the USA team and he's got a World Cup coming up, all those sorts of things. But it does just seem a bit weird that there's a lot of pressure on him. You're starting to see and hear more things around the manager, around Poch especially. So I can't see how he lasts the season, to be honest. I think the stuff that I'm seeing on social media is all around Ange wanting him to go. Like, I don't see many people. I know it's a bit of an echo chamber at times. I don't see many people backing him still. I think he is completely losing the faith and the patience of the fans.
The way I explained it to somebody the other day is that at any level of football, doesn't matter what level, under 7 girls, under 8 boys, doesn't matter what level of football, if your team is constantly conceding sort of goals or struggling in an area of the pitch, as a coach, that's for you to coach improvement. And you can see that if you remember Spurs sort of 12 months ago, everyone was talking about how they can't defend a corner, right? And it felt like it took them an age to fix that problem. We don't hear about that anymore, right? They're not talking about Spurs and corners anymore because they've fixed the problem. They're just conceding goals from everywhere else on the pitch. Mm. And it doesn't seem to be changing the style of play. I mean, Troy Deeney's summary of the Fulham Spurs game was, if you haven't seen it, was cutting and both excellent and cutting in the same way, and just showed what an absolute shambles of a Premier League team Spurs are currently. And that, to me, doesn't matter whether you've got your starting centre-backs on the pitch or not. You should be able to coach football players into being better at football if that's your job and you're paid good money to do. I think it's about £12 million a year.
I think what's happened with Ange is when he came in, he was a breath of fresh air, but all of the coaching was around attacking style of play. And at that point, Spurs were on the up. So they're going to have more of the ball, more possession, being able to get into attacking patterns of play. But when you're on a negative and you're on a downer, you're not going to have as much of the ball, are you? And I don't think he hasn't got any defensive coaching in him. He's completely an out-and-out attacking coach. So I can completely see where the problems are coming, because he's not that style of coach that's needed for where Spurs currently are in the league. I think, as a new manager coming in, you can almost go, we're going to take the shackles off, we're going to do this. But when you are always under the pump, it's very difficult to coach attacking style of play when you've not got the ball.
Yeah. Sometimes you've got to look behind the scenes at the wider coaching teams. Obviously, Chris Davies left in the summer to go to Birmingham, albeit doing a fantastic job on a big budget. But actually, you wonder whether he's got the right people around him that actually can push back at this. Because, if I was sat on the bench next time, I'd be saying, Ange, do you think we should be working on this part of the game a little bit more than we currently are in training? Because it just looks so disjointed and easy to pick off that, if you could pick a team to play every week for your team, it'd be Tottenham right now, wouldn't it?
Yeah, well, Tottenham and the bottom 3, yeah. Excluding the bottom 3, which is an obvious, Tottenham are probably one of them. Yeah, you got to say that. And like you said, that's because of the goals that they concede and the chances that they allow. I think going the other way, Tottenham have always been, regardless of who the manager, have always been fantastic going forwards. And that's absolutely what Ange focuses on. But yeah, there doesn't seem to be any defensive structure or capabilities there. And like you said, is that down to the personnel behind the scenes?
Yeah, I just think that they've got obviously a double-legged tie against Frankfurt, which is very difficult. Frankfurt are a good team. I think there's a lot of Spurs fans foolishly thinking they're going to get to the final, which I suppose you could say a firing all cylinders Spurs might get to the final, but if they're playing like they're playing now, they've got an absolutely zero chance. But surrounded by that, they've got a Chelsea fixture. Like if they go out of Europa and lose to Chelsea, it doesn't get much worse than that for Spurs fans, with them being your kind of rivals as such, and I could really see that being the turning point for Postecoglou if he doesn't get it right.
I think the only other thing that you can look at, to see the side of the coin is Spurs quite clearly have all their eggs in the Europa basket. So the Premier League performances aren't probably going to be as good as what are expected. Yes, you still expect to see improvements and, training on whether that's set pieces, defensive structure, and you want to see that implemented in a game. But it might very well be that those players are completely taking their foot off the gas and just focusing on the Europa, like we've said they should do. Still professional and they should be putting in performances, but that might be what's happening. So, I mean, especially if you're a gambler, I probably won't looking at Spurs, even if they're playing any of the bottom teams, purely because of that reason. They are solely focused on one competition that's going to save their season and the manager's job.
And then the next club that we've spoken about a lot this season as being in dire straits and trouble and problems is obviously Manchester United. But it feels like, and again, of course, we're not getting excited about beating Leicester in the Premier League because, as you've just alluded to there, that's a bit of a given at the moment. It feels like he's starting to turn the corner, doesn't it? It feels like Manchester United. Forget all of the forget the redundancies and the stadium noise. If you talk about just purely the first 11 on the pitch, it feels like he's starting to make some headway with the changes. And of course, the next game they've got, Nottingham Forest, will be a really interesting yardstick to see where they're at. But it just feels to me like they're just starting to kind of get their heads around what he's asking them to do.
I think they are with the formation. I think what helps is Bruno Fernandes's form has picked up. I'm seeing people saying he's the best player in the world right now. He's had 2 or 3 good games of late, and that's it. Yeah, there's some people which are really getting ahead of themselves, and one of them was against probably one of the poorest teams in the Premier League, Leicester, that you'll ever see. And he absolutely dominated the game, but so he should do. Some of those players play in a League One standard, so he should be dominating. They are getting to grips with the formation. For me, though, it's never going to be a positive because of some of the players that are at that level. So Højlund, yes, he scored against Leicester. He is not of the required level whatsoever. There is some players in that squad still that are dreadful. One player that has come in that I do really like, and he has had a bit of stick over the years, is De Ligt. I think he's come in and he's been solid. He's been exactly what they needed. He's not a flashy defender, like a John Stones, isn't he? Gets on the ball, can run with it. He's just solid and is exactly what United needed. Someone like that. He reminds me a bit of Johnny Evans, to be honest. Very, very solid. And he's exactly what they needed. So I think they are starting to mould some of those players in and build that formation. But then they need to kick on in the next window, get a couple of them out and get a few more in, which would just bolster that squad. But I think there is definitely positive signs there from Amorim, and it does look like the fans are behind him as well.
Yeah, look, lots of good points there, and De Ligt for me just looks like a player that needs the confidence of a manager.
Yeah, just play every week. Yeah, you're the main man.
Just because he wasn't a bad player. I think he broke through in the Ajax first team when he was like 18, 19.
Yeah.
He feels like he's been around for a million years. I think he's only second to Brian and Well, sorry, move on. But he's been around for a long time. But actually, the Bayern Munich piece, he was never really entrusted to being the centre back of choice.
Just saying, did he go to Juve as well? We went to Juve, didn't he? And the same as having to fight to get into the team. Whereas Ajax and United, very similar. They've gone, you're the main man. You're starting every single week.
And it's really starting to pay off. And actually, like I say, I think the one part of the pitch that Manchester United probably are okay, and if assuming Euro turns into the player that we think he can be, and everyone's very excited about him, is that defensive three. Look, like as long as, again, of course, stay clear of injuries, if they can keep Bruno performing at anywhere near this sort of level. Now, again, I don't know what's happened behind the scenes, whether there's been a slight change of shape, or change of personnel, but nonetheless, like you say, Bruno is now, he's become the flat track bully that he used to be, i.e. scores loads of goals against teams that he should do. A reference for the teenagers, he's the Graham Hick of Manchester United.
Mark Ramprakash.
But absolutely score 457 on a summer's day in Somerset and be bowled out first ball against Australia. That's what I see Bruno Fernandes as. But that's great. You need them as well, by the way. You need players that can step up and beat the teams that you should be beating. I think that obviously they're going to need a very, very good sort of that they're going to need to have a 10 out of 10 transfer window, both ins and outs.
Yeah, but they don't. I think that the mistake that I see a lot of people speaking about, like the next window, saying, "Oh, they need to get 10 out and they need 10 in." No, they don't. They need 3 out and 3 in for the first window. Spend your money well. Don't spread it across 10 signings that you then have to, if they don't come off, you have to get rid of. Get 3 key players out. So, as an example, Højlund, and get a striker in. Now, the rumours you're seeing are Osherman for Højlund. If that's doable, brilliant transfer, brilliant swap, because Højlund's not good enough. You're going to get some money because he's young, and Napoli want rid. I still don't understand that, by the way, how you're swapping a proven world-class striker for somebody who he looks championship level, Højlund. I think he looks dreadful. So I still don't get it. But for United, that's a brilliant trade, and that's one you can tick off and go, done.
But you have to remember that for whatever reason, Antonio Conte doesn't want him, doesn't like him.
Yeah, no, I get that. But, I'm just on about the actual level of the players.
No, but also remember, Højlund scored his goals in Serie A. That's where he came from. So he's still got that credit in the bank in Italy.
Yeah, but to me, I've heard loads of people saying, "Oh, he's more suited to Serie A." That boils down to not being good enough for the Premier League, not you're more suited to Serie A. He's just not good enough.
But if you're a Napoli fan, do you care? Like, if you bring Højlund in, do you care that he's not good enough for the Premier League or he's in the wrong system?
Absolutely not. All I'm saying on the level of the players, I put something out on Twitter, say it's like swapping a Ferrari for a Peugeot 106. Granted, it's still going to drive and it's still going to work in Serie A, but Osherman is miles better. If there's the possibility for United to do that, that is a star transfer.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I don't think he's been absolutely sort of smashing the Turkish league up, to be fair. But, again, I'd be lying if I said I was as close to the Turkish league as I could be.
He scored his fair share of goals. But again, with strikers, though, if you're a defender and you look and you see Højlund, unless you're Leicester, you go, geez, fancy playing against him every single day. Or you see Osherman and you go, oh, he's going to run in behind. Is he strong, powerful? That's one I'd like to mark.
To be fair, he scored 20 in 22 games, so I stand corrected on that front. He has torn the Turkish league up. But and again, if Manchester United can do that transfer, that would be a good step towards. If we look at that on the other side, don't worry about where Højlund's going. If they can do that, that would be a very big step.
Absolutely, towards that's quality, isn't it? Get somebody out and one quality in, tick that position off. You just need 2 or 3 more of those each window, and you're flying.
And if you look at what Manchester United have got, they've got, realistically, you could argue sort of 3 assets that they're going to need to be sort of clever with in terms of obviously Højlund. I think they're going to probably keep Xerxes, if I'm honest with you. I think that he offers something.
He's been improving. I like some of the things he does. He's not a number 9. He's not a goal scorer, is he?
But he said that himself.
He's a number 10 sort of floating around in the hole. But I mean, I don't think he's worth the money they've paid for him, but I do like some of the touches that he's had. He seems to be developing at United. Whether he's the answer is a different question, but
the point is that, and Radcliffe said this, is that we have to kind of carry the burden of the fees that have already gone before us, but you can't do nothing about that now. Like, whether you pay too much or not enough for him, is he good enough for your team? But again, going back to the point of you've got Højlund, you've got Anthony, and you've got Sancho. If you could do something inventive with those 3 players that brings you in, if you look at maybe the Chelsea squad and who can you bring in from the Chelsea squad that might be able to help you out, and it might be one of the youngsters that are coming through, and you go, you have Sancho and we'll have player X, and the same with Anthony in Spain, and you get somebody in. And then you look at you go back to the free market. If I look down the list, Jonathan David gets in the Manchester United team, Leroy Sané does, Jonathan Tah does, and Guissa does, Boskagli does. Tyreek Mitchell is absolutely screaming out to be a Manchester United player based on their shape, and he's on a free transfer in the summer, assuming that this is accurate and he hasn't signed something. Angel Gomez, Ola Aina, like all of them make
Isn't
Manchester United
Angel
better.
Gomez, he'd be homegrown through the academy as well, so for European competitions, absolute no-brainer.
Yeah, and he's only 24.
Has he just turned down a move to Spurs, Angel Gomez?
I think what I've heard is the battle is between the 2 clubs, Spurs and Manchester. And actually, Manchester United aren't looking that interested in him, is what I'm hearing, but that might not be true. But even if I go down the list, like I say, Marco Verratti, I know he's 32, but a little bit of quality in there. You look at even Josh Brownhill, I know that sounds ridiculous, but I think he had something to the Man United squad currently. I really like Christian Norgard.
I do like Ugarte. I think he's again starting to develop in that role. Like his average tackles per game is ridiculous. like so high. Like I think he gives a nice blend of defensive structure to Bruno Fernandes being able to go forward a little bit. He is the Casemiro replacement, which is already there. Granted, he was very expensive.
Yeah. Yeah, look, I think, like I say, my point is here that Manchester United have got a chance this window. Like I say, you're not going to go and do 7 or 8, but if you get it right, if you can pick up, just enough 3 or 4 players that add quality to that first 11, fit the system the manager wants, I think Manchester United could have not suggesting for 1 second they're going to go from 13th to 1st, not suggesting that at all, but they're going to have a much more consistent season next year, and actually, could see them going in the League Cup or the FA Cup and picking up some.
3 or 4 out, 3 or 4 key players in that fit the style and the system. We'll see them shoot up the league, no problem, because he's a very, very good manager. I think on the Jadon Sancho front, he's got a clause in that loan deal that if Chelsea make Champions League, then it becomes a permanent. So, that you'd think that should be done.
Well, I don't know if you've seen it. There's an interesting stat that if things fall correctly,
it's like 10, 11 teams, wasn't there?
11th place could get European football. Now, that would rely on one of Spurs or Manchester United winning the Europa League, which I think is a long shot, if I'm being honest with you. In fact, I haven't seen if you can do that. If you can bet on anybody but those two to win the Europa League, I think that would be the sensible bet because Frankfurt and Bilbao would be my shout from both halves of that draw. But yeah, even 10th place in the Premier League getting to European football could make next season very interesting for some of those smaller clubs. And then you look at a Manchester United and the Spurs, to not have European football next season might actually be a benefit, bizarrely, because you're not playing as many games.
It's a bit of swings and roundabouts, that, isn't it? It's a benefit for the league to be able to then train every single week with no midweek interruptions. However, to attract players, however, Manchester United will always attract players. So I'd fully agree with that. I think it'd be a benefit to not be in Europa, but if they do win the Europa League and get Champions League, that's quite clearly a benefit. It brings income into the club as well as prestige.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, for sure. Like I say, you just got to, I suppose sometimes you're looking for the benefit, aren't you? The opportunity. The other manager that started to kind of get a little bit of heat, but also still in the mix is obviously Iraola from Bournemouth. It feels that almost people have kind of woken up to the fact that actually maybe it's his style and his methods that are causing the injuries or caused the injuries at Bournemouth. In fact, again, a lot of my Spurs friends are telling me that actually it would just be the same problem with Iraola as it is with Postecoglou. Knackers the players out, they're all getting hamstring injuries, yet he got away with it because they were picking up results. But they've now gone 4 unbeaten. Could this be like almost like he needs to jump ship now before he kind of causes himself any more problems? Even if Bournemouth did manage to somehow get into that kind of upper echelons of the Europa League or the Champions League, which is looking a long shot now, to be fair.
I think when you look at some of the players and some of the rumours that you're hearing as well for Bournemouth next season, they could be cherry picked quite comfortably. Huijsen, I imagine Semenyo will get linked as well. Kluivert's going to be linked to some clubs. They could literally have their players cherry picked and be in a very, very weak position because Bournemouth don't really have the finances to sign ready-made replacements. They sign more up-and-coming players, don't they, and then try and develop them. So they could be potentially a lot weaker, and that might push Iraola's hand to join. I did put something out around Iraola and Spurs, and it was really strange. I was expecting Spurs fans to be really keen on the appointment, to go, I really see this as an upgrade. He's a manager up-and-coming. 90% of the replies I got were negative, saying, no, this is like for like. Don't want him anywhere near the club. So, yeah, I was quite surprised by that because I thought it'd be a really good appointment. But all those replies, I replied back to them and said, who do you want then? Poch was the answer. Everyone wanted Poch.
Yeah, I think there's so many interesting subplots and stories this summer. Really now, like you say, we can say goodbye to the 3 relegated teams or teams in relegation spots. You can say goodbye to the Championship in terms of
unless Man City get minus 100 point deduction from their charges. That's I think the only way, isn't it?
I don't see that happening, mate. If I'm honest with you.
No, neither do I. They'll get fined, but there's a possibility.
Yeah, so we're now talking about that European adventure. Of course, the cups as well. Don't get me wrong. Obviously, Champions League, etc., etc. But we're talking about the cups as being and qualification for Europe, and I think that would have an interesting bearing on who does what and who goes where. And like you say, I think Iraola, maybe some of that shine is starting to be kind of displaced. But if I was him, I would be looking to maximise this summer whilst my stock is still as high as it is in the footballing world, to try and move up the food chain. No offence to Bournemouth fans, but that's where I'd be looking to probably jump ship this summer.
Well, like we said a couple of weeks ago, didn't we, in saying that there's a possibility of them look at qualifying for the Champions League. You now look and they're 10th on 44 points. Brentford, you'd think there's a possibility of them going by them. Palace are consistently getting wins, gaining points. Man United are on the up. So there's a possibility that Bournemouth could finish 13th. Like I said, that takes completely the shine and all the good work they've done there off the season and end on negative. And you think that might scupper his moves. I mean, you mentioned that he could be being eyed up for Real Madrid. Like, there's a possibility that might just become distant past of where he's being linked. So they do need to sharpen up a bit, Bournemouth, because they are the team which are free falling at the minute.
Even that in itself is an interesting point around Real Madrid, because obviously they could still win a lot and win nothing, and that could have a bearing on who is Ancelotti still the manager. If they win nothing this season, the rumour is that he's gone. But if they could still do the La Liga and Champions League double, and he probably stays. We're talking about fine margins of what the future of all of this looks like in terms of both sort of players, managers, and clubs, of course. And talking of fine margins, we haven't done it in a while, mainly because we're so busy with the Premier League. But I think it's just relevant for us to just drop down division quickly to have a catch up on the Championship. Obviously, for different reasons, we've both kind of watched loads of this over the years. Can you see any other version of Leeds United, Sheffield United and Burnley all making it up? Can you make a case for, let's say, the form team at the moment, which is probably Coventry, in the playoffs, being able to cause someone a bit of a bloody nose?
And even Sunderland, I think, short answer is no. You'd like to think those three are better than the other teams. But Coventry has proven to what they did with Sunderland last weekend, absolutely battered them. I said, are the form team. So once you're in the playoffs, the phrase is it's a lottery, and it generally is. I think for me, though, if Burnley don't make the automatics, I think they're nailed on because they just don't concede goals. And I think in a playoffs, they are the most sensible option to be promoted. If it does end up being Sheffield or Leeds, however, it is a bit of a lottery, and teams can go there under pressure and choke. So the answer is no. I can't see anything but those three going up. However, you just don't know, do you? Like, say, Coventry are absolutely flying and can give those teams a bloody nose, like you said.
I mean, just to talk about Burnley's defensive record, they've conceded 11 goals in 38 games.
It's ridiculous.
Absolutely bonkers, And
in the playoffs, that's exactly what you do. You make sure you don't concede a goal to go out, and you nick one here and there, which is what he's becoming the expert at, hasn't he, Scott Parker? So if it ends up staying the way it is, Burnley are nailed on to win that for me.
Yeah, I think you'd have to, again, you have to assume, don't you, at the moment, that the three of that are there will come up just purely based on...
I'd be worried if it was Sheffield, though. I think Leeds are far too good. I think they've got too much quality. Sheffield, though, wobble in the odd game. So I'd be worried if it was Sheffield in the playoffs, because I think someone like Coventry would do them.
Well, I don't know. I thought Sheffield United had a very good transfer window in January. I think that they've done a very good job of strengthening. You look at who they bring on. They've Tom Davies. They've got Berrington Diaz. They've got some good. I'm not suggesting these are players that are going to win you the Premier League, but in terms of for the level, I think they've got a good enough squad to get over the line. But it is fascinating. That top three battle is really interesting, isn't it? And then beneath that you've got obviously the 3/5 teams that probably might be able to make it. But just quickly, we spoke about Coventry a couple of times there, and we were, you talked to us earlier about how we were wrong about Dan Burn, right? I stand by my point, but actually we were more wrong about, if you remember, we had a moan and a meltdown about Coventry City getting rid of Mark Robins and bringing in Frank Lampard, who doesn't know anything, and what's he doing and what's gone on here. Actually, you would argue it looks like it was the right decision.
Yeah, I think you would say that. But in 99% of everyone's opinion saying the same thing, all you had to look at was Lampard's track record of late, which is horrendous, and Robbins' track record, which has been superb. So you go, that looks a bit strange. Yes, they were on a downer, but all that's happened is new managers come in with a new manager bounce. I don't think it's got anything to do with Lampard and his tactics. I don't think they're playing miles different to what Robbins was producing. However, that Coventry team is a good team. They had a good team. So I'm not saying that Robbins would have been able to produce what Lampard has, because I think a fresh manager with tweaks here and there has made a huge difference. But I don't think it was a horrendous shout to say that looks a terrible appointment.
No, at the time, I stand by it. But all I'm saying is that sometimes you've got to look back and go, actually, it's
Oh yeah,
it's
absolutely, yeah. But 99% of the people who were on Coventry's Twitter were all saying, "What on earth is this? Robbins is miles better." Everyone had that opinion based off the facts that you had on the table at the time. But very good appointment, and where they are now looks like to me they're one of the favourites to go up. But I'd fancy them against Sheffield in a playoff.
yeah, I still can't go that far. But yeah, I take your point. I just can't go that far. I think that Sheffield United would have a bit more. But like you say, over two legs, anything's possible. Lampard does actually have experience at this level in playoffs. Obviously, very famously with the drama against Leeds, what feels like a billion years ago now, but nonetheless, probably wasn't that long ago. So he's got experience, of course, of getting the team over the line or certainly through to the final. Can you see any of these teams? Doesn't matter whether it's I think we're probably saying between us, it's from Coventry upwards. It's going to be three from Coventry, Sunderland, Burnley, Sheffield, and Leeds. Can you make a case for any of them having any chance of staying up in the Premier League next season?
Very short answer. I think the answer is no. However, there's one. If there's one, so I thought this season, if there's any promoted teams that can do it, I would have said it would have been this season. You've got an ex-Premier League champion. You've got a team in Southampton that were a fixture in the Premier League for years and years and years. Then you've also got Ipswich coming up with a flamboyant style of play and a great manager. It's worked out to not be the case. I think the only team from this season that you can see having any chance is Leeds. If Leeds can't do it, the others can't. No chance.
Yeah, sorry, can't disagree with that at all. I think it's going to be very difficult for any of them to stay up. The only thing you could say is that the Burnley journey this time is very different. Historically, when they came up with the company, they were playing this great free-flowing football, and that was what killed them. Actually, if they can somehow, and I know the Premier League's different, by the way, but if they can keep that defensive solidity and not concede goals, you're in the game, aren't you? If it's 0-0 in 80 minutes, you might lose 1-0, but you've still got a chance to win 1-0 as well.
Do you know what? The only thing that I look at with this is I look at Farker. He's been proven to not be good enough for the Premier League, and has Scott Parker. So unless they've learnt loads along the way, and the transfer recruitment business, which is why I give Leeds a chance, because of late, Leeds have been superb in the market. You know, Ao Tanaka, quite a few signings that have come for not a lot of money. If they can carry on doing that, I think they've got a chance. But I always think you're struggling when you've got the two managers which are proven to be top-end championship managers, but you come into the Premier League and you struggle. So I just can't see how any of them stay up, especially with Wolves currently being the lowest team in the Premier League. They're going to potentially have a 60, 70 million windfall plus the 100 million they'll bank for being in the Premier League. They're just the gap is just growing consistently. So, I mean, yeah, if not Leeds, I can't see who it's going to be. And I said from the teams that have gone up this season, if they can't do it, I can't see how anyone else can.
Yeah, I think, like I say, I think we both thought that maybe one of them would stay up this season. Obviously, Leicester losing their manager was an absolute body blow in terms of their abilities. He whether we like what he's doing with Chelsea or not in terms of their style of play, that he was a very key kind of fundamental sort of element to that Leicester success last season. We thought Ipswich had quite a good transfer window, so there was a chance. And to be fair, until recently, one of them could have stayed. Wolves obviously were teetering on the edge. Obviously, Everton's turnaround in January kind of took them away from danger. But for football's sake, I hope that we can start to find a world order where they do, but one or two teams do stay up every now and again. Because otherwise, you could almost argue, what's the point? Just box it off.
Well, that's do you know? It used to be the Premier League is the most exciting league in the world. Top can beat bottom. It's becoming less and less the case as the years go on, isn't it? The past 2 seasons has not been the case. Bottom doesn't beat top anymore. There's that much of a gulf. It's boring. I must say, it's boring looking at some of the bottom teams play. I mean, you look at Southampton and Leicester's case, they don't even score a goal, let alone win a game. It is becoming boring. And I think the Premier League do need to look at that, and whether they can have any influence on PSR. There needs to be some method in PSR that gives the promoted teams a little bit of wiggle room or a chance of, recruiting players. Yes, you can go back and say the teams need to be better at recruiting players. That's obvious. But from an actual financial perspective, there needs to be some wiggle room for those teams to do a little bit more to have a chance of staying in the league, or else you are just going to see this continual cycle of the teams coming up are very, very poor.
I go back to, we speak about this regularly kind of via WhatsApp or vice versa, over the weekend or whatever team is kind of the buzzword. But for me, the way that you're going to do this is you just need to invest in youth. For me, like if you're gonna have a chance, you need to look at a 3 to 5 year plan where you go, well, we might go up early, but we're gonna probably come back down again, but we're going to use that to come back down and then go up and start. I think you need to use that bounce, if you do it properly, to just go. It doesn't matter whether we're going to. By the time we get back up, the players, the 18, 19-year-olds who are going to have had 75 first team appearances under their belt. We've sold some for good profit. We've bought other good players. Like for me, this is just about and I know Nottingham Forest did it differently, where they went out and bought a shed load of 33 players because they had a very different strategy. But for me, I think if I'm looking at Coventry, Leeds, if I'm looking at Burnley, Sunderland, and Coventry, I don't know that you're going to be able to attract the international renowned players to come and.
Well, that's why I think Leeds are the only one that have the chance, because out of all of them, Leeds are still a renowned club around the world. The rest of them that are coming up, they're not big clubs. If I'm being honest, they're not. Leeds are still a big club. Forest, when they came up, were a big club. The rest of them coming up, they're not, and that's not being harsh. They're just not going to be able to attract that level of player unless they go out and their recruitment is amazing.
I'd just like to remind all Sunderland and Sheffield United fans that the Twitter is run by Fran, not me.
I'm not being funny, though. They're not big clubs of the past 20 years, though.
No, but they've still got a big fan base.
Yeah, but they've got a big fan base in their area. But Leeds have won European Cups.
Yeah, Sheffield United is still banging out. I think their average attendance this season is more than Leeds. I saw a stat the other day. I'm sure that they're averaging low 30s in the Championship, and Sunderland, as we know, can get to high 20s, low 30s in the Championship as well. So, I think, but
they're not minnows. Yeah, they're not minnows, but I'm saying, but they're not big clubs around the world where you can attract big names of players, and also powerhouse financially wise. Leeds are going to be bigger than those as well. I just can't see how any of them stay up, if I'm being honest.
No, and I think I'm agreeing with that point, but I'm just saying that some of those clubs would see themselves as being big as well, and like you say, maybe the Leeds ownership gives them a little bit more flex. Obviously, being owned by the San Francisco 49ers, they've got some big names behind the scenes there. Of course, they're losing their chief executive Everton, so there will be some disruption behind the scenes. And like you say, they've had a good run since they've lost their previous sporting director, Victor Roy. They seem to have got their heads around it now, so hopefully that continues for them. And like you say, actually, I think both Sheffield United, Leeds, Burnley and Sunderland and Coventry are all teams that, in my lifetime have been top division teams, and actually it'd be great for all of them to be in there if they could, to see how they make it stick.
I am really rooting for a Coventry, a Sunderland, just to not have the same teams coming down and coming up, because it's just rinse and repeat every season in the Premier League. So, which is why it was refreshing to have Luton last year. I just hope that somebody different can make it, just to give us a bit more interest. And
last talking point for the week, obviously we are in the international break. I must admit I've struggled with this one more than the last few. It feels like someone just cut my football sort of sauce off at the source, and there's nothing to watch at all. I'm scratching around watching bloody cookery programs at the moment because there's nothing else to watch. Are you going to be bothered with the England games, or are you going to look for maybe some of the Nations League stuff? Because there is some good games out there. There's obviously the quarterfinals of the Nations League. Or are you actually going to give this England shambles with Dan Burn? Don't care what anybody says, he's not an England defender. Are you going to get involved in that at all?
I 100% won't watch any other international game. It doesn't really interest me, if I'm being honest. I will watch the England game. Albania's first up, aren't they? Yeah, I'll watch that one. Obviously, it's Tuchel's first game, so I'm interested to see style, shape, personnel, those sorts of things. So I will watch it. I'm more watching just to try and get some clues on how we're going to play under Tuchel, as opposed to the personnel, because I think the personnel will look differently as we go down the line. So yeah, I will watch it.
See, fascinating. For me, I'm actually more interested in the Nation Leagues. And by the way, I think there's some, we're not doing it, but there's value in this as well. By the way,
I've already got my. I didn't know if we were going to do a challenge, so I have done it.
Okay, all right. Well, there we go. So I just need to work out quickly what the odds are, because I am doing this. But so you've got Holland versus Spain, you've got Croatia versus France, Denmark versus Portugal, and Italy versus Germany. For me, they're 4 games that I actually will look to watch, and I think there's some interest in there for me, and I think there could be some really good football within that.
Are you selecting all 4 away teams?
I think all 4. No, 3. I'm not sure about Italy versus Germany. To be honest, that one for me could be.
I think that's the dodgy one, but I've gone for Germany, and that's 28-1 if you go for the 4 ways.
Is it really? Wow. I'm just going for the 3. I think based on kind of the squads that have been able to be picked and what's going on, I think France will have way too much for Croatia. I think they're overawed. Portugal are a team that are just full of absolute monsters, really. I always think that they're underestimated at this level. I think obviously in the actual tournaments themselves, they tend to sometimes fall a bit short. But for me, they've got some absolute beasts in there. And I think Spain will always have too much for Holland. Holland had a couple of withdrawals. So for me, I'm going with the 8-1 triple of Spain, Portugal and France.
So I've gone for the same, but I've added in Germany. I think they might just have a bit too much for Italy, and that's 28-1.
Okay, well, look, obviously, no Premier League football this weekend. I hope you get through it. Remind people where they can reach out and touch us, reach out and find us, or abuse us, of course, if you don't like the fact that we don't like Dan Burn as an England defender.
So just quickly as well, we're on. So we landed our banker last week, so we got the 2 in, so that at 2.5-1 landed. And I also landed the £5 challenge, so we've topped up our bank. So I think we've got enough now to play with until the end of the season. So we've got 70 quid profit in the bank. So
I was one goal
away as well. Yeah, you were very nearly to landing yours as well. But yeah, so we've got 70 quid profit between us for the season now. So that should be enough to get us through to the end of the season.
Good stuff. So where can they find out about all these expert tips and advice and predictions? Where are we?
So we are on social media. So if you go and find us on X, Facebook or TikTok, you'll be able to search for TAIE podcast. And if you want to listen to the episode, we're on Spotify, Apple Podcasts and YouTube. If you search for The Atmosphere is Electric, you will find us. If you could just do us a favour and follow us, share, like, whatever it is on whatever app, it just really helps us grow the audience and get us out there.
Fantastic, Fran. As always, thoroughly enjoyed that and look forward to getting back to talk about the Premier League fixtures next week. Thank you, buddy. Have a good one.